What's good, my people? Welcome back. Today I'm going to be building the most powerful airline AI chatbot in the world. Yes, you heard me right. So here's a demo. So here I've deployed the chatbot to my local computer here. So I'll click on the chat bubble and we get into it. Hey there, how can I help you today? I can help you with the following. So this chatbot can handle customer support as well as booking flights. In the future, we'll incorporate handling checking in or also managing the booking. So let me ask it some few simple questions, okay? What destinations do you guys fly to? Our aircraft flies to all our destinations across Kenya, Mombasa, Kisumu, Eldoret, all that. So I won't bore you with the long words. Do I need my passport when flying with you guys? Let us see. Kenyan citizens require government-issued IDs, valid DL or military cards, alien, whatever. So pause and read through it. I have a baby. What should I consider when flying with them? So there you see, when flying with a baby up to 23 months old, you can choose to travel with them on your lap or reserve a separate. So it has several instructions. You can pause and read through it. So let's say now I want to book in my flight. I can help you with booking a flight. First, pick the origin. So mine is Nairobi. The destination is Kisumu. My travel is a one-way trip. So just going. My departure date is tomorrow. What passengers will be on the trip? That is adults greater than 13-year-old. A child is between 2 and 13 years old. An infant is below 2 years. So let me say, just me, my wife, and my 2 kids. So that is 2 adults and 2 children. Is that correct? Yes. So it searches the database for available flights tomorrow. Gets back the following. So 6 to 7, 9 to 9:10 to 10:10. You can see through them. So let's say I want to pick this one. So it says, it suggests I pick the smart package which has the following features. You can see them. Then you can decide it's a bigger price. So I'll just go with smart because I'm a smart dude. Accept. So if you'll read the terms and conditions, then accept. Please enter the passenger details. That's my name and email, phone number, date of birth, nationality. My document type, it can be passport or ID. I'll go with ID. My ID number. Do I have a member number? I don't have. My physical address. Submit. Now the second, adult details. So what it does, it will loop through all those passengers we have said. So we said 2 adults and 2 children. So there will be a form for each of those. So 2 adults and 2 children. If I said just me and my 3 children, it would have 1 form for the adult and 3 forms for the children. So it's that powerful. Okay, so this I'll fill through quickly. Hadassah sounds like a good name. For the first child. For the second child. Now we are done with inserting the passenger details. Now we pick the seats. So remember, we have 2 adults and 2 children. So I need to pick 4 seats, which you can see here. Select 4 more seats. So I can pick M3, M4, M5. And you notice if I just pick 3, I can't select. But if I pick all that I need, the button is now available. If I pick more, it tells me to reduce. Okay, so I need to reduce. So it only needs 4 seats. So it's that powerful. Like it's quite amazing. So thank you. Seat selection is seat M3, M4, M5, and M6. Now pick your meals. So you can see there are pastries, sandwiches, drinks, all that. So let's say I want to go with the pastries. So most people say our pastries go well with the following sodas. You can see them there. So let's say I'm a Coke guy. Do I have any special luggage? You can see them there. Fishing, diving equipment, surfboards, all that. But I'll say I don't have any. Nice, that's it. Your total amount is 41,200. Then click the link below to pay. So there you see, Kenya shillings 41,200. Then let me simulate a successful payment. Payment successful. Okay. Congrats, your flight has been booked. Here's your booking reference number. Then if we check our CRM, the database storing these details of the booking, we can see it. Here you see it, booking ID 19. The details of that specific passenger are there. Okay. Then the payment ID, flight origin, all the things that have been gotten. So you can see even the amount they paid. Okay. And now you're saying, this is awesome, Mutiso, but how do I get into building such? Let me show you. So here I'm on my Voiceflow dashboard. So if you don't have a Voiceflow account, go ahead and create it. We're using this platform Voiceflow to create the chatbot. Okay, so Airline AI agent, and I'll take you through step by step everything that's happening. Also, there'll be a link in the description to access the entire template that we'll cover in this video, as well as the actual code. So if we're using any code within this tutorial, I'll have it in my GitHub link in the description so you can follow along. So let me start with this simple workflow. So we start with just a message of, hi there, how may I help you today? Then we give them some options for either booking a flight, checking in, managing their booking, or a general inquiry. Okay, so if they click I want to book a flight, it takes them to the book a flight workflow, which we'll go through after this. Then if they want to check in, this functionality as well as managing their booking will implement in the future. But next is if they want to ask a general inquiry. If they do so, we tell them, sure, go ahead, ask, I'm here for you. Okay, so whatever they ask will be captured by this block. It's a capture block. Then we take their response and have the AI give a response to that. So we have a response AI step over here. Okay, it's answering from the knowledge base. The knowledge base just contains URLs to a specific airline company. I just got their website URLs and added them as the knowledge base. Okay, so even including the FAQs page is even there. Okay, so we have the question here. Here's the prompt. So it's nothing major. We could override the prompt settings and give it a more profound system prompt on how it should behave, but in this case we can work with it here. We give it the chat conversation history over here, so it can use that as context before giving a response. Then if the AI doesn't get an answer, ensure you toggle this on, the not found path, so I can be like, sorry, I don't have a response at the moment, is there anything else I can help with? If they say yes, we tell them to go ahead, sure, go ahead. Then we lead them back to capture the response over here. Otherwise, if they say no, we just end the conversation. Okay, so in any case over here, if they don't click any of the buttons provided and they just go ahead straight into asking a question, kind of like how we did in the demo, it will go through the nomad step, which is just going to directly capture their response and respond to them using the response AI step. Okay, so in any case, it's a foolproof system. So that's the general inquiry. It's quite simple. Now let's go to the book a flight. So there's a workflow for that. You can go to it through here. Okay, so here what's triggering this specific workflow is the book a flight intent. Okay, so we'll go to the actual workflow, book a flight, and I'll show you the actual intent that triggers this workflow and the kind of utterances that when the user says this statement means they want to book a flight. So you can see what triggers it is an intent, and we will look into the intent itself. Okay, you can see the utterances. So let me just look at it. The name of the intent is book flight. The description is triggers when the user wants to book a flight. This is not really much necessary unless you're using LLM intent classification. So there are two types: LLM intent classification or NLU intent classification. LLM involves some AI tokens, so you pay money. NLU intent classification is less accurate but is free, and is also good enough for these most scenarios. Okay, so we have passing some utterances. You can pause and read through them. I need to make a flight reservation. What airlines fly to my destination? All these show that they want to book a flight. Then you'll create the intent. But if you imported the template, all this is available to you. So then we tell them, I can help you with your flight ticket. So this is just a text message. First of all, kindly pick the origin. So first of all, kindly pick the origin. We display some buttons of the origins this specific airplane flies from, this specific airline flies from, so you can see them there. Then whatever they pick, we set that value to a variable that we have named flight origin. So we went ahead and created a variable called flight origin, save it according to what the user has picked. If they click Eldoret, we save flight origin as Eldoret. Then we go to the block of checking available destinations. Okay, so which is just up here. So what this does is it makes an API call to Airtable where all this information is stored. So let me show you that. So in this table called allowed destinations, you can see the records over here. So it has all the list of all the origins that this airline flies from and the destinations that the airline can fly to from that specific origin. So for example, if you're flying from Eldoret, you can only go to 3 destinations: Kisumu, Mombasa, Nairobi. But if you're flying from Nairobi, you can fly to all these locations, Eldoret, Goma, all this. So we need to get this information and display it back to the user, telling them kindly pick your destination. So this is what the API does. So we have an API step here, which makes an API call to Airtable. So how do we get this specific endpoint URL? Airtable documentation is really awesome. So let me show you. So I'll go to my Airtable over here, click on my profile, then I'll click on build a hub. So go ahead and create a new token. Okay, give that token a name, whatever it is. Give it some permissions. So like the permissions of certain actions it's allowed to trigger. So for example, you only want to read records, you just give it read permissions. If you want also to edit or write to the database, like creating new records, you can give it that. I just like to give it all of them, just in case I might need to access some certain functionality. So give it all those scopes, then attach a database. In this case, mine is Airline base. Then create the token. It will pop up with your access token. Copy it and save it somewhere, because we'll use it within the Voiceflow chatbot. You will come and paste in your access token over here, the one you've created. So you're seeing authorization bearer, then you pass in your access token over here. So here in the URL, there's this critical part. So how do we get this URL itself? Going back here to Airtable database, we'll click on developer docs. Scroll down, still you see web API docs. Scroll down and pick the database you want to access. I just love Airtable. Like, they have the best documentation ever. Then you'll click on the table you want to access. In this case is the allowed destinations. Then list records. Then you want to copy this URL as is. You can copy the entirety till here, or just copy till there, till where the question mark is starting. Go back and paste it within your Voiceflow over here. Then you'll add this specific part of filter by formula, where the origin is equal to the flight origin the user mentioned. Okay, so if you copied it till the question mark, just add question mark filter by formula. But if you copied until there, you'll come and add this section and filter by formula that. Okay, then we capture the response dot records. We want to access the first record, which is in index 0. And why are we doing this? Is because we are ascertained only one record will be returned that matches that specific origin. Because if we look in our Airtable database over here, each of these records have a unique origin. Okay, you can see Eldoret, there's no other Eldoret. You can see Nairobi, there's no other Nairobi. Okay, so we are ascertained only one record will be returned in the list. So you want to access the first record. Okay, so we access the first record and the fields, and want to access the specific field called allowed destinations. Then we save that to a variable called allowed destinations. Okay, so we can do a sample request. So send request, say Nairobi, generate. Then you can see the record is returned, that's specific. So you're seeing we're doing response dot records. We want to access the first record, which is the only record in fact, but we want to access the fields, and the specific field we want to access is the allowed destination. So we'll get back this specific list. Okay, so the list of available destinations. Okay, so if it's a success, we'll go to the next block, which will dynamically render those destinations into buttons so the user can click. But if it doesn't get it successful, you just tell them, sorry, could you kindly pick your origin again? Then we send them back to the pick origin block, which is just over here. So these buttons, so that's critical. So once this is in place, we move on to this next block, dynamic rendering JS. Okay, so kindly pick your destination. Then we'll use a JavaScript step and a custom action block to be able to render those buttons. How do we do this? I've already done a comprehensive video on dynamic rendering of items into your Voiceflow chatbot, so you can go ahead and look into my channel. You will see where I teach on how to render things dynamically in your Voiceflow chatbot. It will teach you everything you need to know. So such a comprehensive skill you need in your toolset. So I click on the JavaScript, I quickly skim through it. So what we want to do is to generate a payload that's going to be used to render the buttons dynamically. So first we create an empty list. Then we want to loop through all the allowed destinations we got from the API, then create an object which represents a single button for each of those destinations. So a single button has a name, you pass in the name of the destination, then it has a request. Okay, so when they click on that specific destination, so for example, They picked Nairobi as the origin, then they picked Kisumu as the destination. When they click on Kisumu, this is a request that will be sent to the Voiceflow runtime, so that we can be able to obtain the actual destination. We pass in the payload over here. Okay, so this path, so this request type matches the specific path within our next custom action block. So you can see here in the custom action block that will render the buttons, we only have one path, which is called path 1. So that matches, this path 1 matches the request type of the button. Okay, so hope that makes sense. And the label, this is not really necessary, but the destination, this is the critical part. Okay, so we can obtain it after the user clicks on it. Then we insert the buttons array that we have created into our payload here, which just has the buttons and the buttons array we created. Then we want to turn that payload into a string, because the custom action payload has to be a string. Okay, so JSON.stringify does that. Then if you go to the custom action block, you can see the custom action name, okay, is choice. If we were rendering some carousel, this would be carousel. Okay, but since we are rendering some buttons, a button is of trace type choice. Okay, then in the action body, this is where we pass in our payload. This has to be a string, and that's why we converted it into a string. Pass in that variable, declare a default path. So this is the default path. Okay, then we want to toggle on stop on action to ensure we only move to the next block once the user clicks on a specific destination on the button. Then in this JavaScript, it's able to obtain the flight destination from the last event. So when they click on that specific destination, let's say Eldoret will be saved in the last event .payload.destination. And this last event, if you remember, if I go back to my JavaScript here, is whatever button they click. So when they click on that button, this is the last event that will be sent. So last event .payload.destination. Okay, so that is critical. By default, next we move on to the trip type block, which just asks them what kind of trip they are going on. So it can be a one-way, two-way, or a multi-city trip. I've only built the functionality for a one-way trip. In the future, we'll incorporate two-way and a multi-city trip. So in this case, if they click a one-way trip, we'll just say kindly pick your departure date. Then we have a custom action block here that will render the, you remember there was a form during the demo, a form that allows them to pick the date. So we used a custom action block to do that. Okay, this is chat widget extensions. I've also done a comprehensive video on that. So if you want to fully understand this, go and check my YouTube channel on videos on working with the custom action block and chat widget extensions. Such a powerful feature on Voiceflow. So for this, I'll enter the custom action block here, which is called x_date. Okay, so whatever name of the custom action we use here is what will trigger the specific extension we want to work with. So if I go to my actual HTML where this chatbot is deployed, we'll be able to see that in action. So here I have my HTML file where I deploy the actual chatbot. So let me just quickly go through it. So this is just some styling. You don't really need to know that. Then the critical part is over here. So this function you're seeing here is the default function we get from the Voiceflow's integration tab when you want to deploy your chatbot. So I just copied that code as is, came and pasted it, the code over here. Then I changed the script type into type module. Why is this? Is so that I can be able to import my extensions, which are in an external file, which is this extensions.js. Okay, so for you to be able to use the import keyword within your script tag, you have to have it as type module so that you can import your external modules, okay, which are this. Then you can see this is the default function stuff. The critical part is after version ID over here, I had a property called assistant. Within the assistant, I pass in the extensions that will be used in our Voiceflow chatbot. Then I pass them in there. All the extensions that I had created, I've imported over here. Okay. Then to go to the actual extensions, let me go, and you can see there are several extensions, but we want to first touch on the date extension. Okay. So you can see the date extension. The structure of an extension is quite standard, okay? And I won't go into the nitty-gritties because I already have a video on that, else this video will be too long. So it has a name of the extension, doesn't matter. The type of extension can be either response or effect. Response extension renders something into the chat widget. Effect just performs an action but doesn't render something into the chat widget, okay? So for example, if you want to deep link something in your website or open a new tab, you're not necessarily rendering into the chatbot something, but you're performing an action. Then you want to match the trace, so the trace that comes from the Voiceflow runtime, and check if the trace type is x_date or the trace payload name is x_date. So this is the name of the custom action we're using. So if you go back to my Voiceflow here, you can see that matches that. Then if it's a response extension, we render a specific form that allows them to pick their date. So here we create a form, okay? Then we want to get the current date and time, so that can be by default selected in the form itself. We want to set the minimum date and the maximum date that can be shown in the form itself. Then some HTML that we insert it, so some styling for the form itself to look more appealing, okay? Then the actual input fields that we'll have, so it has a label, select your date. Then the actual input field, so you can see it there, is of type date, and the minimum date to be shown and the maximum date to be shown. Then we have a button to click submit, okay? So here we get the submit button and the date time input itself, which you can see is of ID meeting itself. Then we want to add an event listener to the actual input field itself, so that when they are typing in and the input field has a value, the submit button is enabled, okay? So by default it's disabled if they haven't picked a specific date, but once they pick a date, it has a value. Therefore we want to enable the submit button, else we want to disable the button if they haven't picked a date. Then we add an event listener, so once they submit the form, we want to prevent the default behavior, which is to reload the entire page. Then we want to access and get the actual date that they've picked. Then we want to make the submit button disappear because they have already submitted. Then this is the critical part, is where we send back the date to the Voiceflow chatbot so it can be used in the flow. Okay, so you can see we're sending back an interact event of type complete, and the payload is the specific date. Okay, then this is the critical part, is inserting the actual form into the chat widget. So this is the code that does that, okay? And is the code that happens before all this happens. So you can see it's even outside the actual function itself. So element.append child, we append the actual form, okay? Going back to my custom action, you can notice the path over here is complete, which is the same name that we call over here. So interact type complete will follow this specific path. Then we have stop on action toggled on, so that we don't move on, which is the default behavior to move on to the next block. We only move on once they've submitted a date, okay? Then we ask them to enter the passenger details, give them some instructions that an adult is greater than 13 years, a child is between 2 to 13 years, and so on. We capture their response. Then we have a set AI step to be able to obtain the number of each of those passengers. So if they say just me, my wife, and my 2 kids, it should be clever enough to know there are 2 adults and 2 children, okay? So you can see you're provided with the user's last utterance. You're to determine the type and number of passengers they've mentioned. Give the response back in JSON and save that to a variable called passengers. In the prompt settings is where the magic happens. So I give it a couple of examples. You can pause and read through the prompt, but you can see examples. So if they say there will be 3 adults and 2 children, give back this specific JSON, okay? 3 adults, 2 children, 0 infants. So that is critical. Give it a couple of examples, then save it to the variable passengers. Then we have a response AI step here just to affirm whatever they've mentioned. So if they said 2 adults and 3 children, we need to affirm and ask them, is that correct? Okay, so this block does that. So you can pause, you can see the system prompt. I give it some examples. If the JSON is that, this is the kind of response to ask to affirm what they've said. So is that correct? If they say yes, we move on. If they say no, we just tell them, kindly mention the passengers again. Then we move them and capture their response again. Okay. Otherwise, if they say that's correct, we say searching for flights. Then we make an API call to get the flights that are available for that specific date they mentioned. Okay. So this we also get from the Airtable documentation. If I go back here in the documentation here, we want to access a specific table, which is available flights table, list records. Okay. Then you copy this as is, the entirety of it. You can copy the entirety of it till there. Go back to your Voiceflow here. Then here we want to add and filter by formula, where the flight origin is a specific origin they mentioned, the destination is a specific destination, and the date is the departure date that we're able to obtain. Okay, and I think I didn't mention on this departure date. Once they submit their date, let me just show you. Over here we have a JavaScript that's able to obtain that. So deep date is last event.payload.date, and if I can show you, the last event is this. So this is the last event.payload.date. So that's how that works. So going back here, you'll also paste in your access token over here. I've covered mine, but you will ensure you enter it there. Then we obtain the response.records and put it in there. So save it to a variable available flights. Okay, so you can do a dummy request. Flight destination, let's say Kisumu, Nairobi. See, there you have it. So you can see. So for that specific date, which is 2024-09-019, these are the flights that are available. So you can see them there. Okay, so that's working. So if it successfully retrieved the flights, it will go on there. But if it doesn't, we just say failed to fetch available flights. Then we just end the conversation. Otherwise, we'll obtain, so through a JavaScript step, we want to be able to render all those flights into a carousel. Okay, so you remember, as usual, we use a JavaScript block and a custom action block to dynamically render things into the chat widget. So first of all, we have our JavaScript here, an empty cards array. Then we want to loop through all those available flights that we get, and we want to create a carousel for each of them and push that carousel to our cards array over here. So a single carousel has an object that looks like this. Okay, it has a title, a description, an image, and some buttons. Okay, so the title, we pass it in here. For example, Nairobi to Kisumu, that's the flight origin to the flight destination. Then we also want to insert the time. So for example, 9 to 10 a.m. will be start time to the end time. So that's how the title is. Then the description, we pass in the price. So from Kenya shillings 10,300. So we pass in the price here. This we get from the air table. So if I go to the fields themselves, so let me go to the available flights. Here you can see it has a date, flight origin, flight destination, start, end time, the price, and the smart price. So remember, there are two packages. There's the basic package and the smart package. Okay, then the image URL, so this is just an image of an airplane which will be shown in all those carousels. Then the buttons, so it only has one button, which is select flight. When they click select flight, this event will be sent to the Voiceflow runtime. So you can see it has a name of select flight. Yeah, this is the event that will be sent. So this request, so is of type flight selected, and you remember this request type should match the path within your custom action block that is after this. So you see here, this has only one path, which is flight selected, and you can see it there. But let's go back. Then you see, once they select that specific flight, we want to pass in the following payload. So the flight ID, the smart price, and the basic price. Okay, so we have them there. Then we want to create a payload to render those carousels. So you can see the layout of carousel and the cards that we've created appear. So all those cards are passed in over here. Then we want to turn the payload into a string, because the custom action body accepts only a string. Okay, then this is the custom action that will render that. So you can see the trace type is carousel, which matches the kind of trace we want to render, which is a carousel. The action body is the flights carousel from the JavaScript step. Then the path is that. Then stop on action is toggled on. The next we go to our JavaScript block here, which obtains the flight selected, the smart price, and the basic price, which we get from the last event payload.flight ID, which you remember from the JavaScript block. Then also I highly recommend the smart flight package. That's a text message saying that. Then we have some cards. So this is a carousel containing the features of the smart package. You can see, let me look into one. So you see it has an image, the title, and just that. Okay, if they want to pick the smart package, we state in the price of the smart flight package. Then we ask them if they want to switch to a basic of a smart. If they pick smart, we save flight package, which is a variable. We save it with a specific value, which is smart. If they pick the basic package, flight package will be saved as basic. Okay, then here's on the terms and conditions, just a statement. So if they accept, we pass in some terms and conditions. Then this is a link that leads to our terms and conditions. How you insert that, you see we have our a link over there. How you insert a link within your messages, you select it, okay, then you say insert link, okay. So insert link, you'll paste it in here. So that's very easy. Then if they click accept, it moves on to ask them, please enter the passenger details. Then it will move on to this block called passenger iterator. Let me show you, which is over here. So this is the passenger iterator, and you're seeing the entirety of these blocks. Let me just zoom in a bit. All this is what will handle displaying the form for each of those passengers, okay. So you can see we first start with the passenger iterator to be able to loop through all those passengers they stated and display a form for each one of them, okay. So let's look into the JavaScript. So this is a critical part, so really pay attention because this part is very critical, okay. So first of all, this code checks to see if the passenger's variable in any case is a string. If it's a string, we want to pass it into an object that we can work with within our code, okay. So first of all, we want to take and get the count for each of the passengers. So adult, children and infant, get the specific counts, okay. And if you remember, this is like an example of how the JSON comes back. So it will check the adults over here. So this meant to be adults. So adults gets the specific value there. Then we want to check if the adult count is greater than 0. So over here, let me give you a context of how we'll handle this. So each of the passenger types, so the adult, the child and the infant, will have an index, okay. So at the beginning, each of those indexes is at 0. So these are variables I've already created in my Voiceflow chatbot: adult count, adult index, children count, children index. So every time it's able to display the form, let's say for the first adult, the adult index will be increased by 1, okay. So now it will be adult index is equals to 2. Then the next time it displays the next form for the adult index becomes 3, until the time where the adult index is greater than the adult count is when we know we have exhausted and we've gotten all the details for all the adults, okay. So if we have 3 adults, we'll display 3 forms until now the adult index will be 4. Then we'll know that we have already displayed the form for the 3 adults, and we should move on to the next form, which is getting the children details, okay. So first we check if the adult count is greater than 0, so which is always the case. Then adult index, we want to check if it's less than or equal to adult count. If that's the case, we want to increment the adult index by 1, okay, until the time where this is no longer true, where the adult index is greater than adult count. Then we move on to check if there are any children. So if the children count is greater than 0 and the child index is less than or equal to the children count, and also that the adult index is greater than adult count. Why are we doing this part? Is to ensure that we're only collecting children details when we have already collected the adult details, okay. So if that's the case, increment child index by 1. So for the infants, we have 2 scenarios. The first scenario is if the children count is 0, so there are no children at all. And the next scenario is if there are actually more than 0 children, let's say 1, 2 or 3 children, okay. So if there are 0 children, we'll use this condition. So we'll check the same thing as initially, if infant count is greater than 0, if the infant index is less than or equal to the infant count, and the adult index is greater than adult count. So we'll only obtain the infant details if we have already gotten the adult details. Then else, over here is checks if there are more than 0 children, so actually 1, 2 or 3 children. So we'll add an extra condition. So first, this is the default. If infant count is greater than 0, if infant index is less than or equal to infant count, and adult index is greater than adult count, and child index is greater than children count. So you're seeing why we have 2 scenarios. So when there are children or when there are no children. So if there are children, we only want to collect infant details if we've already collected all the children's details. Hope that makes sense. So in any case, we increment the infant index by 1 every time we display the relevant form. Okay, and I'll show you how we display the form. So we move on. So once we have that iterator, we move on. So next here is an if condition. Okay, so that's in logic if condition. Okay, and we have 3 conditions and a no match. Okay, so these 3 conditions match each of the passenger types. So the first condition is if, just the same thing we were doing in the JavaScript step. So if adult index is less than or equal to adult count, and also adult count is greater than 0, we move on to display the form for the adult. Okay, so you can see here in the form, this is just a custom action block, kind of like initially, which its custom action name is adult form extension. Okay, you can see it there. Okay, and if I go back to the index.html where the extensions are, you'll see that. So here we have our index.html. We have the following extensions also: adult form extension, child form extension, and infant form extension. They are separate extensions because the form for the adult has different fields from the form for the child, different fields from the infant details. Okay, so if I go to extensions.js, let's go to the adult form extension. So you can see it there. That's the name of the extension. The type of extension is a response extension. Then this is the critical part. This matches our custom action name. Okay, then rendering the form is kind of like what we were doing initially for the date form that we inserted into the chat widget, but in this case it will have some different fields. Okay, so we create a form, get the adult index so that you can say something like adult 1 details as the title of the form, if you can remember in the demo. So we insert that here, so you can see adult 1 details, adult 2 details, and so on. Then we have the fields over here. So you have a name, email, and each has a label. Okay, phone, date of birth, nationality, document type, which is a select field. Okay, document number, member number, physical address, and a button to submit. Then we add an event listener for when they are typing. So when they are typing into it, we first want to prevent the default behavior. Okay, then we want to obtain the name, email, and phone number and check if they are valid. If any of them is invalid, we'll add the class of invalid to that specific input field. And the class of invalid, let me show you the styling itself. You can see adds a border of color red. Okay, so if they input a wrong email address, so that's invalid, the email field will have a red line surrounding it. But also that's just a fallback, because in reality input of type email handles that. Okay, so then if they submit, okay, we want to prevent the default behavior of reloading the entire page. We obtain each of those fields. Okay, then we want to check if they are valid. So this is not really much necessary, because you can see we're only working with the name field. But the point is, once they submit, we want to remove the button, the submit button. Then this is the critical part of sending all those information they've inputted back to our Voiceflow chatbot. So you can see it's following through the path of success, so sending an interact event of type success, which matches our custom action path. If I show you, you can see here we have one path called success, and that's the default path. Then we pass in the payload, the name, email, phone, and everything. Okay, then down here we finish with just inserting the form into the chat widget. Okay, so that's how it works, and will be the same for the other extensions for the child. Just the difference is now this will have less fields. Okay, same case for the infant. Okay, you can even notice the infant has even less details. You just need the full name, date of birth, and nationality. Okay, so all that, but everything else is just the same. Okay, so let me go back to the Voiceflow chatbot. So yeah, once we get the payload, so once they've submitted their adult details, we'll obtain all of them through this JavaScript, save it to a variable called passenger payload, and we'll stringify it. So you can see we're turning it into a string and accessing the last event dot payload. Okay, and the last event is this one. So let me show you. The last event is this one. Okay, then it will check dot payload, and this is what will be returned to the Voiceflow runtime. So let me minimize this and we move on. Once we save the passenger payload, we move on here to a JavaScript that will check and save the details to our variable called passenger details. So this variable passenger details is what will save all the information we get from each of those forms that the user fills out. So for the adults, the children, the infant, all those details will be saved to one variable, which is passenger details, which we've created already in our Voiceflow agent. So first of all, each passenger will pass in the specific index. So this is adult 1, and their details is the passenger payload. Okay, then we want to check if passenger details, so if this is the first iteration, means passenger details will be empty. Okay, if it's empty, we'll first create passenger details and create a new list, passing in the first value as this specific object containing the passenger details. Otherwise, if this is, let's say, the second iteration where we are filling out the details for the second adult, means passenger details won't be empty, and therefore we're just adding into it. So we'll create a list. The list will contain the initial details for the previous adults, then at the very end we add in the new adult. Okay, then in any case we move on to the passenger iterator, okay, at the very beginning over here. So you can see, so what you can move on and see, have we exhausted all the adults? If we have, we'll move on to the next condition, which is for the child, and it will check. It's kind of like everything we did in the JavaScript step. If adult index is greater than or equal to adult count, children count is greater than 0, and child index is less than or equal to children count. If that's the case, we need to display a form for the child, which I think we already touched on in the extensions.js. And you can notice here the path is empty. Why is this? Is because whatever event that comes back from after they submit the form, if that request type doesn't match any of the paths we have over here, it will by default flow through the default path. Okay, so if, let me just show you, if I go back here, if this request type wasn't success but rather some gibberish, this doesn't match any of the paths that we have over here. Therefore, by default, it will still follow through the default path. But I just like normally being explicit, so I say request type success, and I explicitly state my path to be success over here. So in any case, that works. Then we toggle stop on action to only move on once they've submitted some details. We obtain the passenger payload as we had done initially, so you can see that there. Then we move on to saving the details to the passenger details variable. So you can see we're just pushing on an object for the child. So the child is child1 and their details is the passenger payload. Then we move on to the passenger iterator. Okay, back to the very beginning over here. Okay, then it will check, it move on to the if condition here. If we have exhausted all the children details, we'll move on to the third condition. So for the infant, it will check if adult index is greater than or equal to the adult count, child index is greater than or equal to the children count. This means we have gotten all the details for adult and children. Then we check if infant count is greater than 0 and if the infant index is less than or equal to infant count. If any of those is the case, means we need to be displaying the infant form. So you can see we have the infant form extension over here, just default stuff. Then we obtain whatever they fill out to this JavaScript. You can see we get the payload. Okay, then we move on and save those details to our passenger details variable. So you just push it on over here. So that will be for infant. So this is infant1 and their details is that passenger payload. Okay, and that's how we obtain all those details. Okay, so once we have exhausted all and gotten adult, children and infant details, it will go to this if condition and it won't match any of these three conditions. That's where we move on and we'll add a no match path. So you see we have added a no match path over here. So means we have exhausted and gotten all passenger details. So if that's the case, we move on to this JavaScript, and this JavaScript just transforms the passenger details into a string. Then we move on. So we turn it into a string so that we can save it to our databases later. So I'll show you that. So next we move on to pick a seats. So this block is to pick the seats, which is just within the same workflow. So now pick your seats. Then we have a JavaScript that obtains the number of seats that they ought to pick. So that will be equal to the passenger. You see, that will be equal to the adult count, the children count, and we don't add for infants because infants are normally carried. So the total number of adults plus children will equal the number of seats they are allowed to select. Then we say the reserved seats are the following. So this in reality would be calling the database to check any of the seats that have already been booked so that they can be disabled in you remember that simulation of the seats, so that they don't pick that seat. Then in the seats payload we pass in. So this is what will be sent to our extension over here, containing the number of seats they are allowed to pick and the reserved seats, so that can be disabled. Okay, then we stringify it, okay, so that we can pass it to the custom action body. So in this custom action body, this is the name of the extension, x_seat selector v2, and I'll show you that. In the action body we pass in the seats payload. Okay, then we have two paths, either if they cancel or either if they complete picking the seats. then toggle on stop on action for it to move on after they've selected their seats. So if I go back to the extensions.js, go to that specific extension for the seats. Where is it? There you go. So here it is. It's quite long of an extension because it's quite powerful. But I'll be honest, this I got it from Voiceflow's GitHub. So in their GitHub, they have some of these extensions. They really did me a favor providing this extension. I'll do a good job at trying to explain on a surface level of what's happening. So you see, we're trying to match that specific extension based on the custom action name that we get. So x_seat selector v2, which is this over here, you can see. Then we want to render the specific widget of the simulation. So what is helping us display that simulation is this JavaScript library called seatchat.js, and enables us to do all this. So it's quite powerful. It does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So I won't go into the nitty-gritties. You can see it's quite long, and I'll provide the entirety of this code. So I'll just show you the most critical part is where we send back the details of the seats the user has selected back to the Voiceflow chatbot, so you can work with them. So scroll down. So you see here, so in this case we create a payload. We say seats selected is equal to the seats they've selected, and we want to map each of those seats that they've selected and create a specific object for it. So that object will have a label, the type of seat, so for example economy, first class and the likes, and the price of that seat. Okay, then total price, we save it as that. Then this is the critical part. We send an interact event back to the Voiceflow runtime saying we have completed it. So you can see this request type matches the path that we want to follow. If I go back here, you can see we either have complete or cancelled. So if it's complete, then we pass in the payload that we create over here. So that is critical. Okay, yeah, then we move on. So if they cancel, we just say you have cancelled, then we go for them to pick their meals. But if they completely pick the seats, we move on. We obtain the seats selected from the last event .payload.selected seats. Okay, and you can see that here. If I go back here, you can see it here, selected seats. Okay, then we want to turn it to a string. Okay, so we can work with it later. So then in any case, here we just want to confirm the seat selection. So for example, if they pick B2 and B3, it needs to confirm the seats that they've picked for it to move on. And this is a response AI step. You can see. So I give it some examples, so you can pause and read through the system prompt. But if you have the template, this already have it. So, and here I think it forgot to save. So I made an alteration over here because the actual variable of the payload that's coming in, it doesn't look like this. It actually looks different. So you can see here, this is how the payload will have as an array of each of those, an array containing such an object, where each object has a label, type and a price. Okay, but in case it still works, so we move on. But on your side, you'll alter it, considering you'll have to do send an actual request and see the kind of payload that's being returned, then insert it here. Okay, then you can pause and read through that. But in any case, we move on to pick the meals, which is still in the same workflow. Then we tell them we hire the best chefs in town to give you the very best. Then we have a carousel showing the kind of meals we have. In this case, I've only created the workflow for if they pick pastries. Okay, so if they pick that, we just tell them most people say that our pastries go well with the following sodas. Then we display a carousel containing the sodas we sell. Then move on to ask if they have any special luggage. We have a carousel showing that of the kind of special luggage they could be having. So in any case, we move on. If they say, then we display a button saying no, I don't have any special luggage. If they don't have any, then we move on to this block, and this block is very critical, so pay attention. So here we first get the flight smart price and the flight's basic price. It was in a string, so we want to turn it into a number and an integer data type. Then we want to check if the flight package is smart. If that's the case, total amount will be equal to, first of all, we pass the seats selected variable into an object so that we can get the length of the number of seats they've selected. Then we want to multiply it by the smart price of that specific flight. Else, if they pick the basic package, we move on and say the total amount will be equal to the seats selected, so the total number of seats selected times the flight basic price. So you're seeing we're not including the meals or the special luggage. In this case, I wanted it to be simple, so we're just calculating the total amount to be paid from the number of seats they pick multiplied by the price of each of those seats. Okay, so we want to insert commas into the total amount. So for example, if the total amount is 40,000, we want to insert a comma for every 3 zeros, kind of like how numbers are normally printed. So then we save that to a variable called total amount print. Then we'll use that variable in the next section here, which is just nice. That's it. Your total amount for the flight is that specific variable. Click the link below to pay, which is a button. If they click that link, we'll display a payment model for them to make their payment, and that payment model, if you remember in the demo, is triggered by this custom action called x_pay. And if I go to the actual extension in extensions.js, you can see it there. So I won't go into many of the nitty-gritties because I've already done a video on this, how to integrate payments into your Voiceflow chatbot. So it's a complete tutorial on that will help you. So in this case, you're using paystack payment integration. So you can see it's of type effect because we're not rendering something into the chat widget. It's a model that will pop up outside the chat widget. So that also means over here, I shouldn't obtain the element parameter. I can just work with the trace. So that in the trace, we get the email and the amount to be displayed in the payment model. And this, if I go to the custom action block, you'll see we are passing in the email and the amount to be displayed. So here in the action body, you can see email. You'll pass in the email. This could be the email of the first adult. In this case, I've just put it as XXX. Then the amount is the total amount that we calculate from the initial steps over here. Then we move on. Then we have only one path of payment complete. Then stop on action. So coming back here, so the critical part is once they've made their payment, we will send an interact event back to the Voiceflow runtime, passing through the path of payment complete, and we pass in the payment reference number, okay, which will be within the response.reference that we get once they have made a successful payment. Okay, that is critical. Then if I go to my index.html file here, I insert this script tag which contains the paystack modules, all the JavaScript library that you'll need for paystack, so that you can work with it. So it's that easy. Okay, so once it's done, payment complete, we need to save their details. So we'll move on over here. So you see we're moving on to this JavaScript that gets the payment ID from the last event.payload.reference number. So the payment reference number, once they make a successful payment, then we move on because we'll need that to save the booking details. So this is a function that handles this. So I've already even done a full tutorial on comprehensively working with functions, everything you need to know with working with Voiceflow functions and the power that lies within them. So you can go to my YouTube channel and check that out. But the function itself, let me go to it. So it has some input variables which we obtain all the fields that we need to save to our Airtable. So you can see the amount paid, seat selected, the Airtable token enabling us to access the API, and everything else you can see it there, even the passenger details and the payment ID. Then the output variables, so the value that we want to send back once the record has been created successfully is the booking ID, so you can put that in there. Then we have two parts, so success if it successfully created the new record, and error if it failed. Okay, so then the function itself, standard procedure is you start by obtaining all the input variables you need to use. Then we use a try catch block. Okay, so try running this code, try making an API call to save the details. If in any case within the function you run into an error, we're able to handle it here. So this is the error handling part. So capture the error. Okay, so it's a try catch block. Try doing that. If it fails, catch the error. Then we float through the path of error, which you can remember, if I minimize this, is this path over here. Then we want to display a trace of type debug, displaying the actual message of error creating new booking record. Then we pass in the error message. Okay, so you can see here the trace of type debug. If I run the chatbot within the Voiceflow canvas over here, there are normally some small messages in gray that enable you to debug and know what's happening in the background. So they are not displayed in deployment during production. So you notice in the demo there aren't any small messages in gray, but they're good for debugging during development. Okay, so try making an API call to Airtable. You'll pass in that specific URL, which you still get from the Airtable documentation. Quite easy. You make an post request, then we pass in our Airtable token for authorization. Then we say that the body has JSON as the data type. Then you can see we're turning it into a JSON string of the records we need to create. So we pass in the specific fields, all the fields that we need to add. Okay, then we want to turn the response that comes back from the API call into JSON, so you can work with it. We check if the response JSON variable is empty. If it's empty, it will flow through this path of error. But if it's not empty, and also the response json.id is not empty, means it's successfully created the record, so you can flow through the path of success. Then in the output variables, we pass in our booking ID from that. Okay, so just to show you the structure of this, let's go to our Airtable. If I go to CRM over here, so the CRM table has booking ID, passenger details, payment ID, all those details that we need to add. Okay, and the booking ID here is an auto number, meaning it's auto generated. So you can notice here it's an auto number, so each new record just adds on top of it. So 19, 20, 21 and the likes. So you can notice here, so if the response JSON or response json.id is empty, that's an error, means record wasn't created successfully. So we pass through the path of error and return a debug message saying error creating new booking record. Then we pass in the response json.error.message. Okay, so that makes sense. So that's a function to create the record. Then going back here to the workflows, okay, in the function itself, we pass in all those variables we'll use. So total amount print will be in the amount paid, seat selected, all. Then here's where you paste in your Airtable access token. Then the flight selected, pass it into the flight ID, flight destination, all that accordingly. Okay, then here in the output variables, we'll obtain the booking ID from the function, then save it to a variable called booking ID, which we've created in our Voiceflow agent. Okay, so once that's successfully been created, we'll move on to the next step. Otherwise, if there's an error, we just say error saving flight booking details. Okay, so then we move on. If it's a success, we say congrats, your flight has been booked. Here's your booking reference number. We pass in the booking ID. Then we move on to ask if there's anything else they need help with. If yes, we tell them sure, go ahead. So this is a block that goes there. Otherwise, if they say no, we end the conversation. So sure, go ahead is, I think, in the home workflow. So you can see she jumps back to the simple workflow. So that we say sure, go ahead, then capture whatever they ask over here, then have the AI through the response AI step give a response to the user. So yeah, that's the workflow. To deploy the chatbot itself, you'll just go back here, integration, okay, web chat. So you'll copy this code as is, then you go to your index.html, then paste it in here. Okay, then you'll turn this into a type module if you're importing your extensions from a different file, which is extensions.js in our case. But also the other option is creating your extensions within this same script tag, then just using them immediately without having to import it. I prefer this way so that our code is not cluttered with a lot of lines of code. Okay, so once you do that, you can even change the appearance. So you can see here in the, you can, okay, first of all, you can change general details like the title, the description, all this, and some settings. Okay, but also in the appearance, you can upload your icon. So the brand icon, you can upload it there, and the brand color accordingly. So yeah, that's how you deploy the chatbot. And yeah, that's it. So that's how you're able to build an Airline AI chatbot. If you want access to the template itself and the code, that's the index.html and the extensions.js, you'll find it linked in the description. So you can be able to work with that. If you want to work with our team to build such complex and comprehensive AI systems, whether it's a chatbot, a voice bot, or any automations like automating repetitive tasks in your business, there'll be a link in the description where you'll visit our website and book in a meeting with our team. Till next time, stay servy. Peace.